Oh, there he is. Hi, how are you?
Okay, here I am. Sorry for that. How are you, Rachel?
Good,
Hello,
it's so good to
Paris.
see you.
Hi.
Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Listen, let me have you change your name because it's coming up under my name. So change your
Okay.
name and include your pronouns.
Perfect.
And while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and get started with the introduction, okay?
Perfect.
Let's see, where am I? Got to go to these different screens. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this workshop on generational.
Hold up a second, I haven't hit live yet. Are you ready to go
I'm
live?
sorry. I thought I heard it said it was recording.
It's recording, but I'm gonna go ahead and hit live. So give it about 15 seconds and then you can start, okay?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this discussion on generational racism. So when we think about generational racism, we often think about systemic racism being passed down from one generation to the next. And while that is a worthy topic of discussion, that is not really what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about racism from the perspectives or the different perspectives from different generations. For example, the different generations, the 6 types of generations that we're talking about would be the lost generation. That would be those who were born between 1883 and 1900. The greatest generation, those born between 1901 and 1924. The silent generation, 1925 to 1945. The baby boomer generation, 1946 to 1964. This would be the generation that my mother is a part of. Generation X, born 1965 to 1980. I was born in 1970, so I'm a part of the Generation X. Then Generation Y, born between 1981 and 1996, also known as the Millennial Generation. Generation Z, 1997, 2012, and this is new to me. I didn't know there was a Generation Alpha already. That would be those born between 2013, rather, and 2025. So the 3 of us fit into one of these generations, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. So my name is Richard Breather Bell. I am the Vice President of Accessibility and Diversity and Inclusion for InterPride. I am also the Human Rights and Diversity Co-Chair. And I serve the people of El Paso, Texas, as part of their Pride, a board member, El Paso Sun City Pride. And I am the co-director of the community outreach there. I'm a former president of Santa Fe Pride. What am I passionate about? I am passionate about equity and equality, recognizing that we cannot get to equality without equity, and we can't get to either of those without addressing systemic racism and without dismantling white supremacy, as well as the caste system that affects so many of us in one way or the other. It is toxic. It is something that prevents us from growing and evolving. So these are the things that I'm very passionate about. When I introduce my panelists, I'm also going to ask them, what are they passionate about? So let's talk a little bit about InterPride, because some of you may not be aware of what InterPride is, right? So InterPride, and I'm going to InterPride's website, interpride.org. So if you get a chance, please log on and take a look of what's going on there. InterPride brings together Pride organizations from around the world, as well as regional, national, and local Pride networks, therefore contributing to the global coordination of Pride efforts. We currently gather over 400 organizations in more than 70 countries. So InterPride has launched Racism and Oppression Awareness Program, also called ROPE. As Pride organizers, racism and oppression is an issue we have to deal with regularly. The question is, how do we identify this and what are the potential solutions? Part of the ROPE program is rainbow racism. And within rainbow racism, we deal with racism, systemic racism, that finds its way into queer spaces, whether these are Pride organizations or Pride communities. And this is something that we wholeheartedly want to combat. InterPride has an anti-racism statement. Let me share that with you. As an organization representing the global LGBTQIA+ Pride movement, InterPride acknowledges that our community is no stranger to the systemic racism against Black, Indigenous, and people of color shown starkly through some forms of violence in our daily lives. Over the last 50 years of the LGBTQI+ movement building, the violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color, especially Black trans women, undeniably demonstrates ongoing structural systems of oppression and racism added to the unjust police brutality, reminding us that our work is far from done. InterPride is committed to supporting the global Black Lives Matter movement during this critical time, and during the hard work required to address all marginalized people and justices within our organization and communities. To make these actions concrete with long-term impacts that will bring change within our organization and beyond, we will launch our Racism and Oppression Awareness Program, that is ROPE. Additionally, we have committed to direct donations received through the Global Pride 2020 to support anti-racism programs by Pride organizations. We all understand that we need to be part of the solution as we continue to work toward our vision of a world where there's full cultural, social, and legal equality. We believe that this moment is especially critical. We must form broad coalitions committed to addressing the deep forms of structural racism that persistently manifest as forms of violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We hold our entire board accountable and urge every member of our committees to take concrete actions by building and setting up anti-racism, anti-oppression, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion training and educational resources. We commit to providing education to our membership organizations, partner organizations, friends, families, and communities about unconscious bias and institutionalized racism. We will persistently be the people in the room that call attention to issues of social injustice. We call Pride organizations worldwide to join this movement and take the steps needed to end systemic racism. Leave no one behind, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Also there is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And really, this is what fuels our movement and what we're here to talk about today. So I've introduced myself and given you my age and told you about my passion. Let me introduce or have these panelists today introduce themselves. I met both of these incredibly beautiful individuals at World Pride in Copenhagen, Denmark in 2021 last year. I had the opportunity to spend time with both of them, hear some of their stories, hear some of their journeys, their passions. And as a fellow Black individual, I am extremely proud of both of them and proud to know them. So I'm going to allow these two remarkable individuals to introduce themselves. I want you to tell me your name, tell me what your age or what generation you're a part of, and what you're passionate about. And let's start with Anderson.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Well, first of all, I have to thank you for having me. I think this is a great opportunity, not only from a multi-generational perspective, but coming from outside the United States and from outside the English-speaking world. I'm from the Dominican Republic. My native language is Spanish, so if you see any accent or struggle, that's the reason why. But I believe that there is also a different perspective when you come from the Caribbean, but also from a Spanish-speaking Caribbean, a country that was colonized by Spaniards for so long. And well, my name is Anderson de Rosier, as you mentioned, Anderson de Rosier in a more English pronunciation way. I'm a lawyer. I'm 26 years old, so I'm part of the millennial generation. I'm almost late millennial, almost Generation Z. But I'm passionate about justice. I'm a lawyer specialized in international law and human rights. I'm currently working at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, particularly in their reportership on the rights of LGBT persons. But of course, I'm here in my personal capacity, so not associated to the Organization of American States today. And I'm happy to be here. I'm always passionate about fighting for justice, intersectionality, understanding that it's not because I'm gay, it's not because I'm Black, it's just because we have to fight for human dignity and we have to fight for justice and equality wherever we go. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us and participating in this. I'm so excited about that. Ferris, please.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for inviting me, and it's also really nice and really an honor also again to just sit down and then have a conversation with you, and then also the same Anderson. My name is Faris Kuchi Gazaheng. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I identify as a feminine binary queer person, so I go by the pronoun they, them, theirs. I'm also a person with an experience of seeking asylum and being a refugee. So I'm situated here in Austria, Vienna at the moment. And I belong to the millennia, but as not as late as Anderson. And I am passionate about a lot of things, but most importantly is about I am passionate about human dignity in a very intersectional way. And also, as I talk about the human dignities, I also very passionate about respecting and seeing the power and autonomy each individuals and each human beings to define how that dignity reflects to them. And doing all of this works with a lot of softness, tenderness, and kindness, first to myself, and develop that capacity and technology for myself, so that I can also just project it out to the world, and base my experience and myself and the way I move through the world as a point of reference for everything that I do in my work. My work touch so many different areas. So I have an organization that advocate for LGBTI rights back home in Ethiopia and in the diaspora space as well. I do performance arts, and I also do a mental health work with other organizations here in Austria that focus on providing a holistic mental health approach to queer folks with an asylum seeking and asylum seeking and refugee experience. My original language is Amharic, which is one of the 88 languages in Ethiopia spoken. Yeah, pretty much. This is
it. Thank you. As a typical American, I only know one language, English. So I'm always impressed when people are multilingual. I feel like that's something that's truly missing for many communities in the United States. We really need to do a better job of focusing on that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I met both of you and had the opportunity to spend some time with both of you at the World Pride event in Denmark. There, I'm sure we all had unique experiences. So I would like to hear your experience and your take on racism. How was it addressed? What did you see? What did you experience as far as racism at Denmark? And let's start with you, Ferris.
I think I would also like share my experience with also at the same time also with an understanding that there is a lot of work that we need within LGBTI global movements. And my experience at Copenhagen was actually utterly disappointing, because it was, I mean, the theme was hashtag you're included, but that wasn't, I profoundly believe that wasn't translated in including, especially bodies, BIPOC, QTB BIPOC bodies, and specifically also like, goes into more like, to Black bodies. And then goes into deeper into another layers, which is also like, it has a lot to do with also with class at the same time also. And there, we like, personally and also collectively, we did experience racisms, and from also like, from a very generic image point of view also, because when you go through the general programming of the Pride and you go through it, it is very white centric, and at the same time also like, the discussions and also like, the academical way of addressing issues, and also trying to curate the conversations and the panel discussions and all of these kind of things was really highly curated to be intersectionals, and also like, talk about these multi-layer issues that we face from the outside or from the general populations that we face as a community. But I believe it's fair to also really assess where we stand within ourselves, it kind of give a sensations of like, the same way that like, people treat this pandemic as if like, we are on the same boat, but in reality, we are not on the same boat. We might probably be in the same storms, but the way we are handling it and the way we're also facing and really taking this punch is not the same. So it lack that kind of perspective to really be reflective and really see where we stand, and really also where is our point of reference before we also even ask the outside community, you're doing this and you're doing that. So that was my experience. It's really like a very internal reflective way of curating and really like, doing things also, because we were facing a lot of discriminations in the so-called, for instance, hospitality tent. But also like, and at the same time also like, the way it's being curated, it's between Copenhagen and Malmo. And also Malmo is like, is very heavily known space to be violent for migrant and refugees and asylum seekers bodies that close to that spaces. And really lack a vision for it. So that was my experience. I will just start here and then like give the chance to Anderson.
Yes, Anderson, go ahead. Thank you, Ferris.
Yeah, well, you remember, Richard, of course, the situation at the border when we were going to Malmo for the summit on borders, immigration, and refugee experience. That for me it was like surprising how we got to see that even in a conference where we're going to talk about how difficult it is for people to cross a border, to seek for asylum status, and then people in a bus, they get picked out, but they are the racialized and the Black people who get picked out, that kind of thing. That is, yeah, we are in a safe space. We came to a conference in a country that is known to be a friendly country, supposedly, and we still experience that. So that kind of gives you a reflection of how it is in the country from where people are actually trying to flee. With regard to the content of the conference, I really think they made the effort to include a Black perspective, but at the same time, I kind of agree with Ferris when it comes like a token. It was like, yeah, we have to include these voices, but it was not like the voices were part of the planification or the decision making of the conference, but rather that we have to invite them because they have to be present, because we need to make the photograph and say that we are all included. I don't know if it was like that. This is, of course, just my perspective. Of course, I saw many Black people there participating, but that's the way I feel it. Like, it was a token. I want them to be there. And the class perspective, for me, they were like typical Black bodies. They were like this, of course, these beautiful people from a similar background. The people that are usually more popular within the community, but not mostly the marginalized people that we would rather want to see and hear and empower in this kind of environment. That's why I feel like, oh yeah, this was a token. We have to include someone, so I'm going to include someone I like, someone that I might look like if it was me in that position. That's kind of what I feel.
Thank you, Anderson. As you know, I mean, like I said, Anderson and I were spending time together during all of this. And there were, for me as well, that was the one that impacted me the most. You know, we were heading over to a summit about borders and refugees. And that's when these two Black detainees, activists were detained. And we didn't know what was going on until other members, these incredibly people who were on the bus with these activists who recorded some of what happened. And they were incredibly courageous. I don't think they get enough credit for what they contributed, because we wouldn't have even known what was going on without them. So I'm so grateful for these individuals. But for me, you know, as an older Black man watching young Black men go through this, it was disheartening. I know what I've been through. I know what it's like to be detained. I know what it's like to be grabbed by the police and held down and treated in a dehumanizing way. You just don't want that for the generation that comes behind you. You're hoping that they don't have to experience what you did, what you went through. So when these young men went through this, it was very disheartening for me. I could not enjoy or even focus on the rest of the conference. I was in tears. I was shaking. It wasn't sadness, as I had to explain to someone. It was like, oh, I'm sorry, you're so sad. I'm not sad, I'm angry. I'm extremely angry. And this is how my body is reacting to that anger. It's reacting by shaking and is reacting by tears. But this wasn't sadness. This was pure anger, you know, that these young men had to be subjected to this. There was a sense of guilt on my part because I was supposed to be on that bus. I ended up on the wrong bus. The bus driver, what bus I was supposed to get on? Oh, it doesn't matter, just get on this bus. Later on, I looked at my information, my invitation. I was supposed to be on the bus that they were on. And I feel like I should have been there. I don't know if it would have made a difference, you know, but sometimes people hear or see that there's an American there and they're like, oh, well, we better do something or we better react in a different way. So I wish I had gotten on the correct bus. So at least I could have been there and let everyone know what was going on. So there was guilt, there was anger, there was resentment that here we are going over to talk about refugees and borders, and this is what some of our people are experiencing. So I couldn't even focus on anything else. I could not attend the closing ceremonies. I was just, as Anderson know, we were heading and to the closing ceremonies and I left. I couldn't do it. Everything in me told me, you cannot stand up on, and I was invited to stand up on the stage. And I'm like, if I stand up on that stage, it makes it seem like I'm condoning what happened and I couldn't do it. So I went back to the room and really tried to center and focus myself and get my emotions under control so that I can deal with this in a way that would have been effective. So that was my experience there. As a delegate, I was treated very well. I had my own room. I was catered to. I will not deny that. I was treated very well. But knowing what these two individuals experienced was just disheartening to me. And there is no reason for that to have taken place. And as a co-chair of the Human Rights and Diversity Committee for InterPride, we are really involved with Sydney World Pride to make sure we don't have a repeat of what happened at Copenhagen. We are very passionate about that to make sure that Sydney is aware of these issues. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Richard, if I may, I want to add that it was not just what happened, which was of course awful, but it was also the response to what happened. Because I remember that I received a call when I was in the bus telling me like, oh, another bus was stopped when mine was just moving ahead. And I was starting to contact people, like the organizers that were in my bus, like telling them this happened. I was like super stressed out, and they were just assuming that, oh, they probably just didn't follow the orders of what documents to bring. You know, they were already assuming that it was the fault of the people that were detained, and we were moving forward. And of course, there was a point where they started to be responsive. They started to say, okay, we're gonna wait for them. But that was because the people that we were there, we were saying we're not gonna go ahead. But if we were just saying like, okay, it's okay, we're gonna forget about those people, they will just move forward with the event. So for me, that was also like, yeah, all these people, they're gonna be talking in panel in like 30 minutes, in 40 minutes, and they will be speaking how we all have to fight for everyone, how we are all included. But if we don't cry, if we don't yell, then we'll forget the people in the other bus. So for me, that was like, don't meet your hero, because I went there and I'm hearing to these people, and I know the work and the career of these people. And then look, this is happening, and you're having a meeting in this bus and you're continuing your meeting. Like I interrupted a meeting, like this is happening. And they were like, okay, maybe they didn't have the documents, and they continue the meeting. And then you see the same people later on saying, oh, this was so bad. So that's kind of the hypocrisy that I felt like powerless, because I'm in the bus, I'm actually worried, but I cannot stop the bus. This is just riding over. So that was kind of, this is connected to one of the questions, what to do differently. Of course, there are situations that we won't be able to stop, but how do we answer to the situation, especially as organizer of a pride, and as people who are supposed to be experienced with dealing with these situations, with these kind of situations. So this is kind of what I should add there as well.
I also would like to just interject one perspective very shortly. I know we are in a time crunch. One thing is also very important for me also, what I was reflecting was this kind of racial profiling wasn't the first time that was happening during the Pride time. And I actually, in a very unfortunate way, I wasn't really surprised. I knew it was gonna happen because it's been happening. The first day, for instance, it happens with the same activist, because the activist is we are in the same groups, and when we arrive on Sunday and at the hospitality tent, we were asked to really show all of our credentials, and whether we have the vaccinations and all that and everything. It's for everybody's safety, and we are very compliant to that and all that. And we are 7 people, and the 7th person is the white person who is a part of the inviting us and living in Copenhagen. And the 6 of us were asked to show all of these credentials so that we can get into the hospitality tent. But he was not asked. He was he tried to show all the credentials, and then the guy was oh no, you don't have to, just comment right in front of our face. And when we asked and why that happens, then he kicked the white person out. So it is absolutely very important, this is also what I was also reflecting on, within why are we surprised, why are we being surprised when this is being done by the border control, which is really harassing so many bodies and foxes that comes through, while we're doing it within the so-called hospitality tents, and in our constellation, in our constitutes, that's called the World Pride. So it is absolutely very important for us also to really investigate how we move, and how we construct and really also implement what we wanted to do. And then I think we will come up with the questions of how we can do better to the Sydney one.
Absolutely. Robin has a question. She said, what does Sydney World Pride need to do better compared to Copenhagen in relation to BIPOC inclusion? I think that's a great question. So I'll leave that to whoever wants to jump in.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm gonna go first because I know I kind of talk about that, and I think it's the inclusion shouldn't be trying to include people as a subject when we are organizing the content of the conference. It should be making people, involving people since right now, like it's getting planned in decision making, trying to bring that perspective now, but not only bringing people of color, but also that intersectional perspective, because of course it's not the same a Black body from the United States or from the Caribbean in the Dominican Republic, and that is a strategy that is already in itself. It's a decision. What kind of perspective are you trying to bring? Are you gonna bring people of color from the United Kingdom, from Canada? But what happened with all the other part of the world where the situation is completely different? So when you want to include people, it cannot be just, this is gonna be a subject, we're gonna just bring a panel of 2 people. It should be, how do we make people part of it right now? When we are making decision, it shouldn't be Richard being invited to speak at the last time, but it should be someone like Richard or like you, Faris, being involved now, making decisions so you can say, okay, this is a Black person that could represent this community, and not this Caucasian European perspective telling us what kind of Black people can be part of it or not. So that's kind of a thing that I understand can make a difference. And also trying to be more empathetic. But of course, if you don't have enough people already in your decision-making body, how can you be empathetic? For instance, something that is not just about color, but about immigration and also police harassment and abuse. When we went to Malmo, the whole building was full of police officers. And when you come from a country like mine, like when I'm in the street and I see a motorbike, because we have a lot of robbers here, I don't care if it's a police or is someone actually going to assault me, because for me it's the same. The police could assault me as well. So when you're someone that flee your country because you cannot stand the corruption and the abuse of power from the police, and you bring those people to a conference that is supposed to be a safe place, where you put it full of policemen, you're not thinking about their experience. You're just thinking about your own situation and protecting who knows what, because we never got that answer of what was going on, that there needed to be so many police within the building. Because if you tell me, okay, we're gonna put police outside because we're gonna protect you from the violent world in Malmo, I don't know, that I can understand. But inside the building where we were, like we're gonna start robbing everything there. I don't know what they thought it was happening, but I can understand that someone coming from a violent country where the police is part of that violence, that can be even a re-traumatizing experience, and that was not taken into consideration. I understand that if someone from that experience would have been sitting in the decision-making table when those decisions were made, or at least the plan were talked about, then it would have been different.
Absolutely. I agree. That was a very valid point, that even for the individuals who were detained after going through the experience and walking through a building where they're armed police officers inside the building. And you're right, we never got an explanation as to why this is necessary. Ferris?
Yes, and then all of the things that Andres mentioned, for me, it comes from the lack of also the constitutions of how the organizing team was constituted. It lacks the experience, the experience and the knowledge that comes through that experience, right? So for me, as a person who comes from Ethiopia and also who was prosecuted by our police and then flee to another country to be safe, it was very triggering to see 8 to 10 people, police, with visible weapon and really pumping and performing power and dominance. And it was really it shows me the organizing committee really lacked the imaginations and also the concrete practical things to really deliver the diversity that they wanted to talk about. For me, diversity is not about bringing body that look different and just dumping all of us together, but like the work of diversity has to come from the space of making the space that you're inviting people as softer as possible. I know in the white supremacist, capitalistic, and patriarchic world that we're living, creating the so-called safety is a very difficult and also to the point of unimaginable. But like, you know, we really have to work hard and really put a practical work of making the space that we're inviting people a softer space so that people can just be like, and then how can we do that is also, as Anderson said, is by inviting people that can also really represent and interject this kind of perspective into the organizing and the constitutions of the Pride, so that, you know, such kind of things should not happen. Such kind of also, like, you know, this racial profilings that is happening from the third party that are being hired should not happen. And this third security people that was hired to handle all this Pride was dead naming people and was not respectful to our gender affirmations, name or pronouns, and so on. And also, like, you know, in all of these things were manifesting because of the lack of this constitution. So I think for Sydney or World Pride to be a softer space than the Copenhagen, I think it's very important to constitute the bodies that are going to come to that spaces. So when we say constitute those organizing teams, so we're not saying, like, you know, just bring peoples of different kinds of colors and background within the Australia context. No, because, you know, we're coming from Europe, we're coming from Africa, we're coming from USA, Canada, you name it, like, you know, from all sorts of from all parts of the world. And that kind of perspective really need to come all together and really interject, and also being respected and then put in place. And then another things also, like the Sydney team need to do, is also really see and understand the very violent history of migrations that Australia hold. Australia is one of the most really difficult space to just go. So, like, you know, for me, for instance, as a person that is also even existing now in Europe, in Vienna, that can also comparatively hold a certain of privilege with my fellow queers back home. I can't even imagine myself being in the Sydney space, because I know how it is really oppressive and really violent, and also expensive even to acquire the visa. So it is absolutely, this committee also has to really revise and see and try to understand that reality, and in what way they can negotiate, and also really, like, you know, work with the government of Australia and involve the immigration systems and also the bodies that really, like, you know, put in place such kind of rules and regulations. And then another things also, like, you know, they need to also put in considerations is also, again, another violent experience of Australia with this pandemic, like the way they are handling it and the way they're really using it and to weaponize again, still to kick out peoples and really also, like, you know, marginalize people. So all of these contexts and realities need to be into considerations, not only just being put in considerations and on the paper and in our campaign and ad and papers and blah, 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 but also really work on how can we translate these things that we are saying when we say hashtag you are included. What does that mean? And how is it being translated on daily basis of, like, you know, during this time? And how can we also really, like, you know, extend these dignities and really, like, you know, kindness to each and every one that is attending as sincerely as possible. And then, like, you know, once that is done and, like, you know, such kind of hardships might probably happen, again, when that happens also, like, where is the trust go to, like, as Andresen again said, like, are we going to blame the victims that are being detained and saying, like, oh, they might probably, like, didn't bring all the documentation, but, like, as a marginalized body and as a marginalized also institutions, we are marginalized institutions, right? Like, and then if we are really, like, operating the same way that the same systems and oppressions that is marginalizing us and dominating us, then, like, what's the point? Like, for me to be marginalized, I can just be, like, in the regular space and continue to fight that marginalization. And then it also hits differently because, there is like, some sort of trust that is being developed. I know, I remember, like, after I went back home, I was depressed for 2 weeks because it was really traumatizing.
Absolutely.
So
it was very traumatic.
Yeah.
We have a question from Applejack. Is it Applejack something? Cut off.
Freshwater brown.
What was it? Applejack, freshwater brown?
Freshwater brown.
Okay. I don't know what that means, but the question was, were diverse representation employed in the people working or subcontracted staff for the organizing and delivery of Copenhagen? And I don't even know what diversity would entail for Copenhagen. I have very little information based on what I saw. I didn't see much diversity at all, but I will say that again, I don't know what diversity looks like there. I know there is the Greenlandic Inuit people, but other than that, I'm not sure of what diversity looks like in Copenhagen.
I think like I can definitely speak about the subcontracted, like, third party. For instance, like the one thing I mentioned at the securities, like, these are people who are, like, subcontracted, and they were not, like, synthesized about, like, what is transness means and how it's manifests, and, like, in what way also, like, we're operating, and also, like, people's there are people's, like, including myself, like, using a different name, one for security reasons, and two is also, like, because of the gender expressions and identity reason as well. And, like, there was a lack of knowledge, and they were, like, clearly they were not synthesized. So there wasn't any work of synthesization. That part I can just definitely for sure say that because I experienced it. And then also, like, on the topic of also making the organizing team as diverse as possible. I mean, like, if we are diversifying spaces as for a lack of a better word, like as nicely white adjacent as it is, then, like, for me it's not diversity, because in the discussions of racisms, if we fail to discuss about the anti-blackness within that context that we are facing, like, for instance, as a darker-skinned person, it really bothers me to talk about racism within the body that really I face also, again, another anti-blackness. So it is absolutely very important to have that also considerations when we talk about diversity. If you really, like, squinting your eyes to really differentiate who is really diverse within that constellation, then it's not, like, for me, it's not really diverse, because the selection might probably comes as, like, you're a little bit more adjacent to whiteness, so it's better, it looks better. I didn't see any kind of neurodivergent people being part of it. I didn't see disabled bodies being part of it, or if they were part, they were not visible. So yeah.
So Applejack said that's their name. And so thank you for sharing that. I apologize if I came off offensive. I thought it might have been like a nickname or a code name or something like that. There was Esther mentioned that that she doesn't believe that Sydney white pride is being inclusion, that is inclusive, that it's predominantly white, that the board is predominantly white, middle class, so all their perspectives coming from that environment. And I will say that we Esther, we recognize that as the Human Rights and Diversity Committee, and we are committed to addressing that for World Pride. So I believe you joined the committee, so you know that we're going to work towards to make sure that there was definitely inclusion from different perspectives. I do know that we are meeting with the World Pride Committee as the Human Rights Committee to talk about addressing these concerns. So we're involved, we're invested, we're really trying to make sure we handle this, especially from people who are part of the Human Rights Committee who were there at InterPride, at World Pride last year. We were there at the border crossing at Malmo. So we know what's going on. So we're taking this information into meetings. So I just want you to be assured of that. Applejack said that, was there spaces that you could go to if you were triggered, like counseling and so forth? I would say, from my perspective, if as a Black man, I'm triggered by what I saw, I'm not going to be inclined to want to discuss this with a white privileged individual because I'm thinking, how can you relate to my experience? So I personally didn't see a Black person there who can help me to navigate these traumatic experiences and how triggered I was. Anderson, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I remember in Malmo, they said they had someone. I don't think they had like someone permanently for the whole World Pride, but I think under that specific situation, because after it escalated, after it was a thing, we made it a thing while we were waiting for the others. I remember they'd even book a room in case the people that were detained wanted to stay there and didn't want to participate in the rest of the summit. There, they said they had someone. I didn't see that person because, of course, I'm looking at all this stuff, and this is just white spaces. That's how I see it. And for me, of course, it wasn't even so surprising because I've been living I'm in the Dominican Republic now, but I've been living in the Netherlands for almost 4 years. And you can see it. You go everywhere. It's like, it's white spaces. I am the stranger here. And that's the same. That was the same in Denmark, and when we went to Malmo, and you see that in the staff. Like, it was a staff, and that staff was even less engaged in what was going on than the staff in Denmark, because at least the staff in Denmark, they knew, oh, World Pride is happening here. But the staff in Malmo was like, oh, we're having a one-day event, and probably they brought volunteers from all over, and they were just like, why volunteers telling you, oh, you have to go this way, and please don't go the other way because that's not your color. And you have like a yellow and a red color, and you cannot even change it. You don't have like, that was kind of the thing. So yeah, I think it's the same. I wouldn't feel like that would be the kind of people that I would like to trust and to have a conversation of what I experienced as a Black person and how traumatizing it was for me. But that's, again, and I want to mention about the question of Stair, about the composition of the board. I really appreciate the work that you're doing from the Human Rights Committee, how you're gonna communicate these concerns. But that's part of what I was proposing. It shouldn't be just us yelling and telling them from the outside, but if this is already an issue and this is a composition issue of the board of Sydney World Pride, why don't we address that now? If it's a composition and we have voices, it shouldn't be for them to hear us when they want to hear us. It should be for them to open a space there that these voices can be part of, if they really want this kind of inclusion, because this is all about what you want and the strategy. It's about what you do and what you don't do, and it all means something at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Ferris?
There was what is like a caring team, and then, like, the one is like definitely, like, they were all white, and then, like, I know they cannot relate for instance, like, to everything that I'm saying, like, as like, for instance, me seeing 10 police officer, like, pumping their chest and, like, walking around with their loaded gun was triggering for me. But like for them it's safety. So it's like, it's really difficult really to have that kind of conversations. But in all honesty, also, they had the team, and then the team was more concerned about really managing us, because we were kind of also, like, saying, like, we're not going to be part of the panel discussions, or the seminar is not going to start unless these people come, like, our fellow activists come. And we were sitting outside, and they were more concerned and being used as also, like, crowd management. They were doing a crowd management work, like, they were constantly coming and like, are you gonna go inside, are you gonna go inside? And I'm like, I like after fourth or fifth time I had to yell on somebody, like, like, why are you asking me? Like, I am making a stand here. I'm not going to be part of the seminar unless my people is safe and know that and see them by my eye. And they were just doing crowd management. I'm sorry to say this, but that's exactly what happened. And even that was, it was just like, it was just a name.
Mhm.
Do you remember when they came out and they said, like, oh, we call the to detain person, and they said that we can go ahead,
I
that we can
remember
go
that.
ahead. And I'm like,
So
of
ridiculous.
course, if you call someone, they don't want to feel like they're the one stopping the whole conference. They're going to tell you whatever they want, because those people are being traumatized in that very moment, and they're being violated by these policemen. And you call them like, hey, can we go ahead without you? And they were like, they really, I don't know if they really expected us to just go and, oh, if they said it's okay, it's okay. It was like, yeah, it's kind of a non-apology apology kind of thing, we don't really feel it, but we just have a consent here, and that's fine.
Mhm. Absolutely. So we have Esther wanted to know, what is your expectations of Sydney World Pride as regards to Black and Indigenous people of color? As a member of InterPride, as the co-chair of Human Rights and Diversity Committee, I can tell you from my perspective that I am committed to making sure that there is inclusion. I want to make sure that, and our committee wants to make sure that the First Nations people are not just part of an advisory committee, but they're actually involved in the decision-making process. Because let's just face it, certain experiences are not going to be related and be prepared for it if there are not people who have those lived experiences in the room when decisions are made. And that's extremely important. I can tell you from my perspective as the co-chair and from my committee, we are committed to doing this, and we are working with World Pride, the World Pride Committee, to make sure that there is inclusion of the BIPOC community, particularly the First Nations people of Australia. I'm going to do the best that I can do, and that's all that I can promise you from my perspective. I'm a board member of InterPride as Vice President of Accessibility, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I'm a co-chair of the Human Rights Committee. I'm going to do all that I can do, and if I'm not being heard, you're going to know I'm not being heard. If I feel like my voice is not taken into consideration or taken seriously, you'll know that I feel that way. I'm not going to go silently. That said, I do believe there are other individuals as far like involved, like the co-chairs of the World Pride Committee. I also think they're involved and they're committed to making sure that there is diversity. We want to do a better job for Sydney than what took place at Copenhagen. So I can assure you of that we're going to do our best. So we're running out of time, and it kills me because I want to continue this conversation, but there's one more question I want to ask. And the question is, 3 different generations, and as you see as this conversation went, even though we're different ages from 3 different countries and backgrounds and so forth, what we experienced at Malmo was very similar. I mean, neither of you said anything that I didn't share or agree with. So 3 different points of views in different generations, but yet we fell on the same point. So in light of what happened at Malmo, in light of what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and how the Black Lives Movement became a global movement, and I need to say that because there are those who thought it was limited to North America, like United States and Canada. We're like, no, turn on your news, turn on TV, and you will see there have been horrific incidents in France and other parts of Europe and different parts of the world. And I had an opportunity to go to South Africa and heard some stories as well. So this isn't something that's limited to North America. But in light of all of these challenges we're seeing, what do we expect from Pride organizations, like the local Pride organizations, as well as InterPride? Ferris, you want to start?
It is like the expectation is really countless, but I think again I'm just gonna also point out again, like, you know, to really like for us to see each other, because we really, like, you know, hold so many power and so many expertise within ourselves, so many privilege within ourselves that we can share with each other and really uplift on each other from each other, and really like learn also from our shortcoming and mistake, because, like, you know, to certain degree levels, like, you know, as a person who experience queer phobia from a country that wasn't colonized, but yet again really infested into this white supremacist agenda, and like I reached to the point of, like, you know, really, like, you know, the global queer movement contributed how it is a Western influence. For instance, like, you know, everybody that back home, what they say is, you know, who I am is a Western influence, and then it sadly it did really contribute to that mentality, because it was, you know, global queerness is so white. You know, everybody that has a reference is whiteness. And then, so one of my expectations in light of also all of this, like, you know, the violence that Black body both in US and globally face, you know, Europeans, they can just really like try to say, like, you know, we're free from all of this, but, like, you know, they are the mother of racism. And it is really very important for us as a queer community to really, like, you know, see how it is we are contributing into the violence that other bodies that face outside of the so-called global norms, where queer equality is somehow comparatively respected, but not true. But again, still, we really need to reflect and see what kind of image are we projecting? Are we projecting
Absolutely.
and contributing into the belief of, like, queerness is a whiteness? We need to change that. That's my expectation, because it's really like it has a lot of work.
Anderson?
Well, I'm gonna try to keep it short, but for me, in principle, the Pride Pride in itself is just a platform for us to share our queerness. It's a safe space, or it is supposed to be a safe space. But for me, it is not just enough to address queer phobia, and it will never be enough. Because when we talk about queer experience, it is not the same. It cannot be ever the same when, for instance, in my particular case, when I feel that I have reached spaces that are supposed to be safe for me because they are queer safe, then I feel microaggression because of my skin color. or I feel microaggression because of my hair or because of my accent. And when you are organizing a pride, and especially a pride where you will have people from different cultures, from different perspectives, then you need to acknowledge those differences, and you need to acknowledge how we all experience intersectional discrimination. And it's not just talking about intersectional as a token again, but it's not just, oh, here's a space where, for instance, again, countries like Denmark, countries like the Netherlands, those are countries where you can say, okay, most of the people are really okay with queerness. But then are we okay with queerness when people are Black, for instance? Are we okay with queerness when they are not from middle class or high class, but actually poor people that are trying to live their own experiences? So those are the things we need to keep in mind. This movement, this cannot just be about LGBT people. It has to be about LGBT people and they as a whole, how they come, their experience, where they're from, how they're from, their social context. And that is what we have to take into account. This is what I said at the very beginning. It's not because I'm Black, it's not because I'm gay. I remember an interview, they were saying like, oh, are you interested in this because you're gay? No, I said, yeah, if I would probably be straight, I'll be doing this, because when I have to talk about children's rights, I'm there talking about children's rights, and I'm not a child, but I believe in human dignity. And you cannot be like, oh, I already got my rights, so I don't care about the rest. I cannot be, oh, I'm gay, I'm fine with homosexual rights, but I'm not gonna talk about trans people rights, you know? And that is what we miss in the community, how we have this solidarity for each of the other group, each of the other individuals. That is what we need to keep in mind as Pride organizers, or you guys as Pride organizers.
Thank you two so much. I have enjoyed this. I appreciate that the wisdom, the perspective to come from people who are young enough to be my children. But I learned a lot from you both, and I want to thank you so much for that. I want to appreciate this, the beauty in Blackness and our experience and what we have to share, what we have to offer, what we have to contribute. I think you two are excellent examples of that. I wish I can hug both of you and kiss both of those beautiful faces. So yes, absolutely. I hope we get the chance to see you again. And I definitely want to do some version of this again, because this was not enough. I think we'll all agree this wasn't enough. We didn't have enough time. We need to delve into this a little bit more. But thank you so much. I really appreciate that you took the time to do this and what you had to offer.
Thank you, Richard, for having us.
Thank you again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was beautiful seeing you both.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.